Right. See you clearly. Awesome. Yeah, it's fine. Mhm. Yeah, it is. I have a good friend who has ADHD, and she gets so mad when like they give her a hard time. Did you give me the link too?
Hello, I believe we heard now. Okay, just making sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, welcome to our first ever um live to talk about neurodivergence and racial equity.
Yes, yeah, we are.
So if you are new here, we are Intersected Project, Intersected. Our mission is to empower actions that promote racially equitable communities, making everyday heroism more accessible. We do that through a lot of different means, and this live is another way to interact with you, our community across the US, and empower you with this intersection of neurodivergence and how it is such an asset towards racial equity. And so, for that reason, brought together Glen and Tiffany. You want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, no problem. My name is Tiffany Witcher. I'm known as the Charity Witcher on Twitch. I do a lot of charity streams, and I talk about accessibility advocacy in gaming and in streaming to help people educate them more about why accessibility is important for people who are disabled in the gaming community and why gaming should be more inclusive to everyone, especially those who are disabled. And I'm also a voice actor.
And pronouns?
They, them.
Glen, you want to introduce?
Yeah, yeah. I am a behavior therapist, and I have AD. I self-diagnosed myself with autism, formal diagnosis. My spare time, I try to that is celebrate our diversity, speak in different ways, so many different, and how I'll dig this deeper. How aren't appreciated in a
Yeah.
lot of parts of society.
Your pronoun?
Oh, yeah, my pronouns are
And I'm Sky. I am the editor in chief at Intersected Project, so for the publication side of things. I'm happy to be hosting from Chicago today, and I use she, her pronouns. Well, before we get into detailed questions about racial equity, other intersections, neurodivergence, um, would you mind defining what is neurodivergence? What does it mean to be neurotypical? Um, yeah, just set the ground for us.
yeah. I think to talk about neurodivergence and neurotypicality, we need to talk first about where neurodiversity came. And the first known occurrence of in written form of neurodiversity was by sociologist Judy Singer Seven, published an article mentioning, yeah, 1997's the
Okay.
earliest we know of.
Yeah.
In our lifetime.
Yes, it's actually younger than I am. So really not that long ago, but neurodiversity is the notion that it's normal and acceptable for people to have brains that are differently from, and beyond that, we ought to embrace those. I would say true neurodiversity, equity, and have all different. So jumping off of that, neurodivergent, neurotypical traits, neurodivergent people have. So neurotypical people are those individuals who do not have a diagnosis of autism, praxia, or other intellectual or developmental difference. So a neurotypical person thinks, perceives, behaves in ways that are considered normal by the general population. But neurodivergent is a neurotype that is simply different, sometimes considered special. Really, it's just different to not to be respected as. So let me be clear here. I'm asserting that we should stop saying special. I'll maybe dig into that more later. But neurodivergency, autism, dyspraxia, Tourette's, dyslexia, synesthesia, dyscalculia, and Down syndrome. Uh, any consider
Oh, I can hear
Okay,
you fine.
that's strange. Why you on the live stream it's going in and out.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So when I say neurodivergent is a neurotype that is simply different and is sometimes considered special, it's really just different and ought to be respected as such. Um, so neurodivergencies include ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, Tourette's, dyslexia, synesthesia, dyscalculia, and Down syndrome. And something we're probably going to talk about more later is that many consider people with mental illness to also be part of the neurodivergent community, since they too face many barriers in society due not having a typical functioning brain. So
Yeah, Tiffany, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I like how you said special needs, because a lot of people that I know don't like to be considered special needs. They just want to live their lives in normality just like everyone else. And like for me, I have dyslexia, and as a voice actor, yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult because it's harder for me to read than normal people, but I don't like the term for my dyslexia in the term of special needs. And I have a lot of friends that have ADHD, a lot of fellow VTubers that have ADHD, like Takahata 101, and that I really, really look up to. So it's yeah, the term special needs really like kind of irked me personally. Like we just want to live normality as much as the next person. So yeah, that's the only thing I really wanted to add. That's the one thing that really stood out for me from that statement, because I don't personally like the term like that we need special needs. Like we can live as normal as the next person. We just have to take extra steps.
and it ought to be equitable in that way, where people with
Yes,
not
100%.
just neurodivergent people, but disabled people in general, right? Where our
Yes.
needs aren't special, and I think that's a huge thing. Like, we should be able to go to work, college, all those things, go out and
Mhm.
leisure activities like everyone else without
Oh,
those barriers, right? Yeah.
So
yeah,
let me make sure.
100%.
Yeah. So I'd like to summarize, make sure hearing you both correctly. So neurotypical is the term for what is considered normal within society, whether or not there should be that. Neurodivergent is different than neurotypical. Could be dyslexia, could be ADHD, could be a number of things, but just brain wired different than the perhaps the majority. Um, and then neurodiversity being a term that just encapsulates all different neurotypes, um, all of it all together.
Yes, I'd agree. What's it? Equity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all should be on equal grounds with everyone else. And like that's the thing that people in the disability community are fighting for right now is that equality so that, everyone can be together and there's no discrimination. And like as much people don't believe that, there's a lot of discrimination against people, those that suffer from mental and physical disabilities. And like we just want that equality, equity, and all these things and not to have, these special treatments.
Yeah.
That word really irks it just really irks me, sorry. But yeah, it's one of those things where like, yeah, we just wanna live just as normal as everyone else, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but I don't know if this would be relevant, but you were mentioning right at the beginning, before we kind of introduced ourselves, about access to medication, and um,
Mm.
would that be?
Yeah, I was telling, so you probably heard, I realize now that I had Tiffany's audio on and not mine on while we were waiting.
Well, you have just mine on?
It
Okay.
was just yours, I believe. So the audience probably just heard you. So they didn't hear me talking, but technical things we're all figuring out. Um, anyway,
As it relates to equitable, like
yeah,
access.
I was mentioning that, and I even talked to my mom about this because I've had
Mhm.
ADHD since I was 7 years old, and I was diagnosed. I was really, and we'll get more into this later. How some people get it when they're young, and some people get it when they're
Mhm.
older, and how I think it's so important to have that knowledge early on. Like,
Mhm.
is important. Make sure I'm speaking into the mic. Heard. So, can you guys hear me? Um, so I was mentioning earlier that I had trouble with medication. Like today, those of us who take ADHD medication, it's if it's a stimulant, it's a controlled substance in the United States. I don't know where it is elsewhere, but that makes it
It's a controlled substance in Canada as well, some medications, yes.
oh, it is in Canada as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And while you think that those of us would be appreciative so that resources aren't taken, it makes it incredibly difficult for those of us who have the need for this medication to go through our daily lives. Um,
Mhm.
I have ranted on Twitter many a time about
I've seen
how
those.
you've seen them, me ranting about.
When you people add me on Twitter, I kinda, like, read their tweets and stuff like that, just, like, to get to know the person, so that's just my thing that I do, but, yeah, I read some of your, interesting, upsets.
Yeah, I was ranting about how I feel like, no offense to pharmacists, but I have to educate people sometimes in prescription rules that I've had to learn that nobody told me. That I get in trouble for when I'm like, it's like I have to be very clear in what I'm saying. I can't say I'm getting a refill on a prescription. No, no, no. It's just a fill. Because a refill, people will be like, well, there is no refills. And I'm like, okay, but I have the prescription here. They're like, oh, that's a controlled substance. And I'm like, yes, I'm aware. It's a controlled substance. Okay, well, you need a prescription from your doctor again. And then the doctor takes 2 days to get it to you. And then
Yeah.
your insurance says we don't cover this version of this drug. So we'll have to order another one that'll take 4 days to get here. So that's it just gets really, and then that goes into the healthcare complex and how healthcare, like certain insurances will only cover certain medications, so you have to get different ones. So yeah, it's been a whole mess
Mhm.
for 20 years of my
Oh, I
life.
I feel you so much with that situation because, like, I grew up very sick, and I had my of course antidepressants and stuff for my chronic illnesses. And yeah, insurance companies are strange because one time they'll cover it and then the next time they're just like, yeah, we don't cover this anymore. And you're just like, but you covered it before. Oh, okay. And then yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the most frustrating thing, especially when you have to like get your medication and you need it and they make you wait even longer. And pharmacists don't understand, like, I guess because maybe they don't go through this or they don't understand someone that goes through this, but like a lot of pharmacists just don't understand that, when you're suffering from whatever you're suffering from, sometimes you just need it as soon as possible. So to keep on that motion of the medication, because the moments that you can drop off the medication, sometimes who knows that what can happen, things can come back. And like, it's just one of those things where it's really frustrating. Um, for that, and I 100% agree with you. It's not fun at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, speaking of health, quick discussion, and then we'll get into more issues of or concerns about equity within race, gender, etc. But
Mhm.
on the topic of health, are mental health diagnoses considered to be neurodivergent? I know there is much discussion on this.
Mm. I was they thought I went to a therapist and they thought I had ADHD, but I didn't. Um, so it was a strange situation because like I was a very like energetic child. That's because when something excites me, I get very happy. But like it's just it was I guess they were like, well, she seems like she has it, but she doesn't have it. And like I tested myself a couple times throughout the years and they always said negative, but it was kind of strange that my therapist wanted to diagnose me with ADHD when she was supposed to be giving me therapy. So like, yeah, yeah. So it was kind of strange. Now I think back on it, growing up, but I feel like it should be more of a medical, to diagnose someone with, um, something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
like my dyslexia, it was like they did test on me and they're like, read this and all these things, and I was just like, I can't. It looks funny. So,
But to
um,
have like for me, and I think you mentioned as well, to have
mhm,
depression and anxiety or other mental health
mhm.
disabilities, disorders that way, is that considered neurodivergent? What would you say? And basically, I've in the conversation I've read, it's some say yes, some say
I wouldn't say yes. I don't know, I just feel like it's different.
I am on I it's muddy. And the reason why for
Mhm,
me it's muddy, I would say for me, I think yes. Um, but I can see both arguments where um neurodivergencies aren't mental illness in the sense that it's a sickness or an illness. It's a different
mhm.
way of being a different neurotype, a different way of processing information. Now, to clarify,
Yes.
I have depression and anxiety that could be also from my ADHD diagnosis because of what I had to cope with throughout my life. That's something as well. However, I, I and people are arguing that it's illness versus a divergency, but I'm like, it's not a
Mhm.
typical brain still, is what I think. I don't know. It gets that's why I'm saying it gets muddy because it's not a
Yeah.
typical brain. You still have boundaries. You still have obstacles in society
Mhm.
as a mentally as someone with mental illness. Yeah, that's. But I totally respect people who are thinking on both sides of the thing, and I welcome in people with mental illness to look at themselves and be welcome into a neurodivergent community.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
it feels a little bit more comfortable or relaxed and not having to, I don't know, hold myself together as
Mhm.
much when I know that like we're all thinking in different ways and processing in different ways. Um, so I think I feel a little bit more relaxed in those settings personally.
Yeah, and then it gets into like the philosophy behind mental illness. I'm like, is it also just another divergency? Not just is that you have because of well, first of all, there's brain chemicals, but sometimes it's like what burdens are put on you from how the life around you is, the way society functions, and how it can
Oh,
burden us in different ways.
Yes,
So that
absolutely.
yeah.
Thanks for both of your input on that question. Um, I am really curious, and would love to focus on how neurodivergence intersects with race. To Okay, we were hoping to kind of talk all together, the three of us, until about 7:45. We're in
Mhm.
Central Time, and then have like 15 minutes of questions at the end. We'll see if we get any questions along the way. But that being said, we want to be a little focused in our answers. Maybe have help me do math. 20-ish minutes in that case.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so we want to talk about intersections with race, gender, and any other intersections that might impact your life that you would like to share from. But specifically, neurodivergence and race. Um, what disparities are there within minoritized communities where neurodivergence might be part of those disparities and like just gaps in perhaps care or inclusion, um, any needs for justice, etc.
So I grew up in a very, I would say I grew up in a very like, I guess you can call it not the nicest place in the world. It was projects and things like that, and we did not have the same benefits as people who happen to live in nicer places and like basically white places. And for me growing up, not knowing what was wrong with my reading, I was known as the dumb kid because I couldn't read properly. And we living as a black person and growing up, you're when you're trying to tell certain particular people that there's something wrong with you, oh, you're just lashing out, and there's no such thing as depression, there's no such thing as this, there's no such thing as that. And you don't have the same, you know, you don't have the same doctors near you. You have to travel out very far away, and some people just can't afford that. It wasn't until I became a teenager I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And it took a long time for that because my mother was constantly working, my dad was constantly working, and they tried their best to get me help. But like a lot of the doctors in my area didn't, I don't want to say believed in it, but didn't have the skills or the training for things like that because they just deal with the current stuff and like emergencies and body aches and things like that. And we had to travel to go to these specialists for my dyslexia, my depression, and all these things. And you see this a lot in like, with people of color. And you see this a lot in like stories and like media and things like that, where we don't have the same benefits as everyone else and we don't have the same privileges as everyone else. And it's really a sad truth, but it's getting better. A lot of like these places are now understanding, especially the more news comes out, that dyslexia and ADHD does happen in children like myself growing up. So there's not an equal stance when it comes down to getting the healthcare and the well care that you need for this. We don't start on the same running line. We are very far behind. And this is only going from my personal experience growing up in a very poor area, basically, in Maryland near Washington DC. So yeah, and that's the weirdest, that's the strangest part. It was Washington DC, and Washington DC is known for some of the best healthcare, but not everyone has the money for that healthcare. Some of the best hospitals in the world are in Washington DC, but like sometimes there's underlying like racism, and I've dealt with that, and you can't afford going to like, these places like Children's Hospital and stuff like that to get diagnosed. You have to travel far away because the insurance company they provide you is really bad. So, like, yeah, that's just my from my own personal story. Like, yeah, it is a different race for us. It really is, unfortunately, especially if you grow up in poverty.
Yeah, and to take that into perspective, it from my it's like, let's just take your story and mine. Where I
Mhm.
grew up, my family's blue collar workers out in a small town in Illinois. But because of my, I think partly because of my privilege, I was able to get
Mhm.
access to a, my dad had private insurance through his
Oof.
job, and though they paid a good amount of it for him, thankfully, and I was able to, I happened to meet a doctor who also, I learned later, has ADHD, who diagnosed me when I was young. He saw my parents and he was like, "Oh my god, these parents have ADHD, and I think the kids have it too, because it's genetic." But
Mhm.
just that I was able to get those accommodations, and though I faced barriers, I it just shows that there's disparities for those of us. It's two different races, like you said. My starting line was different than yours, and
Mhm.
that's something we need to acknowledge.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And to back up what you're saying, I actually have a study here from 2013, though it is 8 years old. Statistically speaking, it talks that when they looked at Paul Morgan, a doctor at Pennsylvania State University, conducted a study that looked at more than 17,000 children in the United States. And it found by eighth grade that black children were 69% less likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Latinx children were 50% less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than white children.
Mhm.
And then in kindergarten, and specifically, it would be 70% less likely that black children were to be diagnosed than white children. And that was also the same for Latinx children whose primary language was not English. So it matters, because knowing those things early on and having not special needs, again comes back to that, having accommodations, having
Yeah.
Yes.
those lifts to barriers, having those groups, having the support that you need is important. Um,
Like you were saying, Tiffany, the way that you were perceived as not being as smart as the other kids when really it was just you didn't have the supports that you needed to
Exactly.
study well, or to, yeah, with your teachers. And so that was a failure of the system for you that could have been addressed at a lot younger age. Um, had, well, yeah, if you were a white person, which would just be a different experience for us. So,
Mhm.
yeah, and I have colleagues. I work with autistic adults, and I used to work with autistic children more, to help them with school and stuff like that. And several of my peers or colleagues who do what I do. I don't work in a school myself. I work for a nonprofit with adults,
Mhm.
but they'll go into a school system, and oftentimes you will see a teacher who is it's sometimes it's a white teacher, but it's the teachers can be sometimes a little, they blame someone who is autistic for their behaviors and that they are the problem child. And you'll see
Exactly.
that it can be worse when it's a child who's a person of color than it is a white child who is autistic.
That's what happened
That's
to me.
Yeah, it's like there's judgment, but it gets worse when there's stereotypes piled on top of that. Now, let me say that there are wonderful teachers out there. Teachers
Mhm.
are great, but we need to also listen to these stories at the same time, that this is a problem. This is not okay, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking that happens. Not that we should pity somebody, but that we see this and like, that's not justice. That's not equity.
Mhm.
change
Yeah,
dead.
change it. Yes.
Yes, more training and things like that is something I've been talking about for a very long time because I when I worked as an entertainer at a theme park, a lot of our staff just did not know how to deal with children with autism, but seeing, I did because I knew what it's like to grow up differently, so I was always the person they run to, especially around Halloween season, so that's why they dressed me
Mm.
up as a friendly character because I knew how to deal with kids and all types of children. And like it's one of those things where I think more training needs to be done. There should be more classes for teachers to help with this situation. And like it's a little sad because like you said, I was the kid that the teacher was like, well, there's something wrong with her. And I was just like, okay, point me out. I love that. So yeah, I fully believe there should be more training with kids with special needs, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, and about accommodations, about preventative strategies about accommodating the student or accommodating
Mhm.
the adult beyond school, because neurodivergency goes into adulthood.
Job interview,
Yes.
um,
100%.
yeah, ways that we're interacting that are social etiquette that might not become naturally, to everybody and is just assumed. Um, I had to so my former job, was in employment with youth who were 16 to 24. My current job is still in employment, but with refugees. But I was doing some trainings for a job readiness training, going over interview skills, resumes, just that basic, those foundations for getting a job. Um, and in that training, it was over the course of many weeks, and some of the feedback from the students was this isn't relevant to me. Like this doesn't take into consideration people who are neurodivergent.
Mhm.
Specifically, I think around the interview discussion that we were having. So that was something that I went back and did more research about, like how can we acknowledge this, and how do we? In my case, I had to still teach like this is how you can navigate it within the system
Yeah.
because the system exists and employers are still in most cases going to just have this one mindset. So this is how you navigate it, which is not like in the system, but a way to manage for now. And then grow my own knowledge of like, yeah, what are other ways that we can, as adults in this world, um, exist
Mm.
and succeed without having to conform necessarily to that social etiquette that is very much made by white men. Um, yeah, it's heteronormative, it is patriarchal, and it is white, and it comes
Mhm.
into both education system when we're younger, and then when we're finding
100%.
jobs as we're older. And um,
Mhm.
I think about employment a lot because that's my main job that I do, but other facets of adulthood as well.
Well, I mean, I try not to get political, but you can't talk about neurodivergency and ableism and disability without getting political. But
Exactly.
utilitarianism, that the people are designed to be contributors to society in a sense of contribution, in the sense of creating wealth or resources or putting forth something that's not something tangible, I guess. And I think that ignores a lot of people who do contribute to society, but not in the sense that the patriarchal white man would say, perhaps.
Right.
Like that view, the European, the colonizer, like this face, like that view, like there are many ways that you can contribute to society, and we need to be more supportive of those things. Now, how do we do that? That's another question. That's something that we're learning. That's something that I think we need to be more supportive of, and also just work towards that step by step. Um, I can talk more about that. I think when we were talking about gender, yeah, I was going to bring up,
Yeah.
and also people to follow on Twitter who have ideas. Disabled people who have their ideas we need to listen to, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
100%.
if you want to actually jump into that, that would be great. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking about um, oftentimes mothers who are staying home um,
Mhm.
and working 24/7, um, but not being seen as working or not being supported in the same
Ooh.
ways. So that's immediately what comes to mind when you say other ways of contributing to society. There's many, many ways, but that's just the first one. Maybe you want to jump into some of your other examples, or Tiffany add in.
Yeah, the mother thing. I've been there. Uh, but, other ways that people don't believe someone's contributed to society, is even advocacy online and speaking out about these things. People don't believe that's contributing, but you have no idea how much words and social media have so much power over this over you at anywhere. And it's fascinating that it fascinates me to this day that people don't saying like, "Oh, you're a content creator and you're not have a real job." And it was just like, "Well, yeah, I do. I talk about advocacy. I stream for, people. I do accessibility reviews live on stream because someone wants to see that and someone needs to know. So when people say that content creating is not a way, it's not a real job, or it's not a way to, help like contribute, that's completely 100% wrong in my opinion, because like some of the biggest content creators today, like Markiplier or Jacksepticeye, have impacted so many people, even with charity. If you look at their charity numbers and how many people are just like on the boat and just want to help because they are listening to these content creators and say, hey, this is for a good cause. Can you donate? And they do it.
Yeah.
So and like the whole mother thing, it's just like, "Oh, you're always at home with your child, blah, blah, blah." No, I'm doing my part as a mom, taking care of that child and raising that child and doing everything. You have no idea how hard it is to raise a child. And not to mention carry that child for 9 months, give birth, and deal with things like postpartum depression. You have no idea what women go through with these things. And people just don't see that because of our gender, and it just drives me crazy. Like it's just one of those things I never understand to this day because like with getting into the subject, you will get doctors telling me, "Oh, she's," at the time when I used to go by she, there's like, "Oh, she's more emotional. She's a woman. They're more emotional. They're more sensitive.
And
This
that
is
just
why she's."
discounts, like, anything that you're about to say.
Exactly. 100%. And it's just like, "What? No, I'm telling you what's wrong with me. I'm not being sensitive. I'm opening my mouth. I'm just telling you everything that's wrong with me. I'm not being emotional.
Yeah.
If someone of the opposite gender came in and said the exact same thing, I know what you would say. You would tell them to toughen up, but you wouldn't tell them they're being sensitive and over emotional. I know that 100% because I've
Yeah.
seen it in my community. It it's just it makes me angry. It makes me legit heated. But yeah, going back to that, but yeah, it's just those things that people don't understand, that just because we don't work a 9 to 5 job, we're not doing anything. And I've done a lot for people, and I'm very proud of that. And so have other content creators and mothers and all these unsung heroes, as I like to call them.
Yeah, for sure. Hours of your time, hours of research, hours of time, whether
Yeah.
or not it is for paid work or for unpaid work, because I know you're doing a lot of things. So paid or unpaid, you're doing so much tangible contributions as well as impact, in terms of like thought influencing. Um, and then at the same time being looked down on, based
Yes.
on gender or I think oftentimes for folks who may be neurodivergent, maturity, seen as
Mhm.
more childish at times, which
Don't get me started on infantilization of
uh,
disabled people. I will go on a rant, but that's a different topic.
uh, but like you said, Tiffany, reasonable, level-headed, just not given as much credit for the words that are being said or the thoughts that are being
Mhm.
conveyed to doctors or to teachers, um, due to the stigmas that are attached.
It's 100%. And gender and misogyny is still something running rampant even in the medical field. It's and I don't know why we're in 2022 and we still have doctors asking questions that makes us feel uncomfortable as, female presenting people, and it's just like
Yeah, and female presenting, like, I heard, I was tuning into someone on Twitter, and it's like that black women are overdiagnosed with bipolar by their
Mhm.
doctors, but severely underdiagnosed with ADHD or autism,
As 100, yes, because I have a
or
friend who was
female
just
presenting.
diagnosed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Fascinating.
They
or
see us as
schizophrenia
aggressive.
about black people in general, both male and female presenting. That schizophrenia is way overdiagnosed
Mhm.
with people. So it shows you the systemic racism and the blight of that in the healthcare system has a profound impact on people as well as the education system.
That's why a lot of
Um,
black people don't trust doctors, and you'll see that a lot with a lot of people. We don't trust doctors because we're constantly treated a certain way, and when we're constantly treated that certain way, we lose trust in that very easily, and it's really unfortunate.
I want to check in with our moderator online, Layla, if you can drop in our chat if there are any questions. Otherwise, we have more questions and more that I want to get into. We can spend a bit more time if there's no audience questions at the moment.
Did you want us to talk about gender more, about like how that in neurodivergency?
Yeah, I think you had some Twitter folks that you wanted to say.
Yeah, I let me think here.
And
There were some folks that, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also love to talk about strengths,
Mhm.
like in this fight for racial equity that we are collectively in. Those who are on our live today, those who are in this room, and across the country. Um, what are the strengths that neurodivergent people bring to the fight for racial equity, and how does neurodiversity as a whole, all of our different neurotypes, how does that contribute to this as well? So we can wrap up with it after we touch on gender and some other topics that you have.
I think that all kind of ties in
Mhm.
together because everything I mean, this is intersected, so
Yes,
everything ties in
it
together.
does.
Yes.
um, but I when I think about, I think that's something I want to bring up. One more thing about race in the
Mhm.
neurodivergent movement, that I think there are, and then I'll start talking about gender as well. But something that I'm noticing is that there is a lot of white people, people that look
Mhm.
like me, and it's good that
Mhm.
who are neurodivergent, who are leading the neurodivergent movement to fight for equity. That's not a bad thing per se, but it's not equitable because there are a lot of people of color who are feeling excluded from the movement because there is racist behaviors, there is racist beliefs that are inherent in some of these things that white people are doing in these
Mhm.
movements. And I think that has also prevented a lot of people from feeling comfortable in moving forward in this equitable, bringing race and neurodivergency together. And so I've spent the past year mostly just following people of color who are autistic, disabled, ADHD, things like that, so that I can have more perspective. And I wish to encourage people to, when I say do your research, if you are a white person, that you do your research and you listen to
Yes.
people who have different perspectives than you. You don't always talk, but you listen. Um, and I'm trying to listen more. I'm talking right now, saying what they're saying, and I say that as I talk, so that's kind of ironic. Listen to what people say, and we gotta form, and we gotta reform this movement in a way that is more equitable and more welcoming. Um,
Yes.
and I have some recommendations I can give at the end of people that I have been following that I think have helped me see more clearly. But I'll do that near the end more. Who are people who have left what they say. I am done with the neurodivergent movement. Some of them have said, I am done. They're fed up with the racism in it. And I'm like, that's a real, if rough thing, you know? So it's something to
Fight
take
together.
seriously. What was that? I'm
We're
sorry, Tiff.
all we're all in this fight together, and
Yeah.
like it really we should be listening to people with all different backgrounds because like I keep saying, we all started races a little different. Some people got a bit of more head start and some people lag behind, unfortunately. And there are people with so many different backgrounds with this, and you're right, people of color are not seen. Every time I see talks about this, it's like it's a white person, and I'm just like, no one looks like me. How am I supposed to be welcome when I don't see anyone that looks like me? Or like even with like LGBT, I don't really see many people in the LGBT talking about this. They're too afraid to speak up because how they're treated, unfortunately. And like I just had a friend who was diagnosed with ADHD, and she spoke this literally just happened too. She's a black woman. She just was diagnosed, and one of her friends that is not black was like, "How come you got just diagnosed now? You're 36." And she was like, "Because I didn't have the privilege that you did. Why would you ask that a question of that of me? That's rude." And it's just like I literally looked at it like wanted to scream. But yeah, people need to listen to our voices more because we do have a lot different experiences and we do still deal with the discrimination and we're all supposed to be fighting as one. And it's really sad that, like I said, we're in 2022 and we're still dealing with this. Like, it just it blows my mind, and it will never stop blowing my mind, and I just want things to get better, but the people that have to make this work are the people not making this work. We can shout to the top of our lungs, and we can try our best to be heard all the time, but it's the people at the top that are gonna try to accept us, and a lot of times they don't,
Yeah.
and that's the sad part.
Um, so what I'm hearing, and tell me if this is what you're saying,
Mhm.
but both firstly within the neurodivergent movement and then within society at large,
Mhm.
um, the experiences of queer, of Black and brown, of neurodivergent folks need to be heard and not questioned
Exactly.
within the neurodivergent movement so that it is more inclusive of neurodivergent people and
Mhm.
can make change overall in society. Is that
Yeah, I would be nice to see some change, like, to see more people speak about this that look more like, me, and so, like, the next generation of children can it, it's like one of those things. It's like if a kid grows up seeing the same thing over and over again and don't see anything that looks like them, I mean, they're not going to go towards it. But if they see something different, like for me, it was when I got my first black Barbie, I didn't know they came in black. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. She looks like me. So
yeah.
it made me want to play with Barbies more because I knew there were Barbies that look like me. Same thing goes for the community. If there's more people of color and more people with different backgrounds speaking up, there will be a more of a growth of people of color coming in the community and not being afraid because it's run by all white people. And I hate to say it like that, but yes,
Oh,
it's the hard truth about it. So
yeah. And that makes
yeah,
us stronger ultimately.
yes.
Because it's not just one perspective, which is very narrow minded and might be missing a lot of
Mhm.
opportunities for growth in our industries that we're working in our communities. So that definitely strengthens us, like everybody
Mhm.
as a whole, as Americans as well.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
100%. We just need that diversity a bit, and it's not, and it's like people are gonna be like, "Oh, you're being political," but it's not just about that. It's not just about the political thing. It's about making the community stronger, much stronger,
And the
with
difficult
different
oh, go ahead, sorry.
experiences. No, no, no. Go ahead. I'm done.
And the difficult thing is that it's a privilege to say you can't get political because some of the things that we want, disabled people want, are some of the things where we look for equity ends up being political. That's where it can be,
Mhm.
or let's say you're part of the LGBTQ community, especially neurodivergent people are more likely to be part of that. That's something, but yeah, it is going to be tough.
Yeah,
I
it's
wanted
very
to,
tough.
yeah, we wanted to acknowledge someone in the chat, Tiffany. Tiffany
Mhm.
had a thought. I think, yes,
Oh,
Tiffany in the
okay.
chat. Sorry. Tiffany Gong in the chat. I think something important to note here is that the accommodations that we make differently make for
Mhm.
differently abled minds and bodies
Mhm.
benefits everyone to an astonishing degree. Yes, and it can make things equitable for people who are not outwardly saying I have autism. People who are not who don't even know if they have it. Maybe if it's
Yes.
more equal,
But still,
can benefit
still,
from it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that they can use a more flexible, adaptive, and compassionate space. And what you
Yes.
all are doing here is making neurodiversity more broadly known. Well, thank you, Tiffany. Tiffany Gong in the chat. And then she said, I just looked this up. About 30-40% of the population are thought to be neurologically diverse. Yes, I would say that. Because we
Mhm.
already know that at least 25% of the population are disabled.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
And
By
that's big.
neurologically diverse, I'm assuming that means neurodivergent because diversity includes neurotypical and neurodivergent. Would you
Mhm.
interpret that the same way?
Yes, I would
Yes.
interpret that.
I would agree. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tiffany in the
Yeah, that was
comments
nice.
for saying that. Also, if there's anyone else who wants to add in the comments or ask questions, definitely open to that. I would love to start concluding with some additional ways
Mhm.
that neurodivergent people strengthen the fight for racial equity. So we talked about how diversity as a whole
Yeah.
is just beneficial. Um, but what would you say in terms of maybe certain skill sets that are more common with different neurodivergent folks, or yeah, other strengths that really add to the fight towards racial equity?
Um, Autistic people can be very knowledgeable about specific topics. And of course, being an autistic, you can bring to the table a different way of processing information, a different way of looking at things, a different perspective. And I think that
Mhm.
that could be so meaningful in the racial justice movement. Just because, not because I would have much to say about the racial justice movement, but because I think that just bringing a new perspective or bringing in a new voice can make it even stronger. Um,
Well,
but
you are a part of it. White person, but you're a part of
yes, yes, I'm a white man, but
Yes.
I am a part of it. Yeah. Um, and I think having that a lot of people can have certain knowledge. Autistic people can have certain knowledge that others might not have, or someone with
Mhm.
ADHD with hyper focus is, I think, one of the traits that. Sorry, my phone is going off and it is
No, it's
pissing me off.
oh,
But
no.
throw it.
Don't
Um,
do it. They're expensive.
they're expensive little boxes. Um, what was I saying? You see, I have ADHD. You having like hyper focus, or you
Mhm.
can think different. We're constantly analyzing. Those of us with ADHD constantly have many different. I think that's something. But Tiffany, if you have anything that you wanted to
Yeah,
say, is
I definitely believe like people with like autism do see things a lot differently than we do. I have a few friends who have autism, and they are the knowledge that they give me is amazing. Like there's someone that can really whoop me in like murder mystery thing, and I'm just like, you're too good at this. I have to ban you from this. You're too good. And but I have so many amazingly gifted friends, and they bring something new to the table when like I even need help with something, and their ideas are just so different than mine. It's beautiful. And it just like I'm just very proud of them. Um and for myself, like the gift, like when people are dealing with suffering and dealing with their experiences, they gain that to tell other people, but like, look, this is what you can do. This is places that can help you, and especially if you live in a low poverty area, you have to find these resources for other people. And that's why I believe like people who that don't have as much, it's kind of a gift, because then we can search and help other people that don't have as much. And that's the resources that I try to bring to others, especially in low poverty areas for mental illness. Just like, here's something I found on the internet. I know what you're going through. Here's this, go for it. And stuff like that. But like it's like you said with autism, it's just they just can like when they get an idea, they just go, and it's so amazing. And I love all my friends that can do that. And I have don't have too much experience with friends with ADHD, because they don't like they don't they're very medicated, I guess the term would be. And they don't show they have ADHD a lot, but they do say they have ADHD. And they do. And I do have one friend who's like, you ask him about a subject, he's like, oh, I know this one. And he'll just keep going and going and going. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I rattled on for 15 minutes. And I was like, no, this is great knowledge, keep
Yeah.
giving it to me. I love dinosaurs, let's go. Like, it's amazing and beautiful at the same time. So yeah, I 100% agree that people in our community can give to other people, especially those who are in low poverty and don't have the same resources. 100%.
that sounds like my college roommate Logan. He is infinitely knowledgeable.
So cool.
We know this guy. He's infinitely knowledgeable of dinosaurs and everything that's thousands of years old. We
You know,
do.
yeah.
Did you want to
No,
the
I'm just gonna
question?
go and say like how amazing. That's separate time, separate time. But yeah, also creative thinking. I think a lot of
Mhm.
folks that really is an asset in problem solving, in yeah, ways that we can pursue racial equity and get around barriers that are there. So
Mhm.
love that. We do have a question. Abby, so glad you're here. Sorry we didn't see your question immediately. We had to scroll down.
Oh no.
Um, but Abby asked, are there any small everyday ways that non-neurodivergent folks, so neurotypical folks, can be more supportive and accepting? I love that question.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
That is
Definitely
a very,
listening.
very good question, and I like, it's like, let's make this concrete. I mentioned earlier, I think part of it is just, I think the best way to do it is, this might be like a lot of work, I don't know, but like following people on Twitter that I mentioned,
Mhm.
listening to those stories of people that, and then there's like different ways that you to fight for alongside people who are
Yes.
neurodivergent, or what is equitable. I think that's something that's important. But I don't know, checking in on people, being aware of, for example, an environment,
Mhm.
that people with neurodivergencies are more likely to, for example, we can sometimes get overwhelmed with sensory overload, more likely than neurotypical. So loud noises, lots of stressful stimuli can really overload us, and we can go into like a state of almost shock, and we can become very
Mhm.
angry or emotional in ways that you may not understand. I think
Yeah.
that it's not that we're angry at you, we're angry because we are overloaded sometimes. So being understanding in that could be something. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, cuz like we like I have someone I know, like if they can't be in, we used to go to conventions and they cannot be too crowded. They were like, "Look, I gotta get air like right now." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go. I will be your bulldozer. I will help you and we will go outside and we'll get fresh air." And I 100% just being there for that person, being that shoulder that they need. Cause some days we just don't have good days and we just need someone to talk to. We're not trying to be, and the worst part is when we want to talk to people, we kind of feel like a burden. And we don't want to feel like a burden. And it's like just if we need to talk to you, if you can't talk, that's 100% fine. But just say, hey, can I talk to you later? I can't talk right now. And just give us that comfort that you're there for us, you know? And you don't, and if you just, and if it's not your thing, it's just not your thing. And even like the smallest thing, like playing a video game with us can help us. Like just listening to music or maybe watching a movie on Discord or something through Netflix. That can be so empowering and helping someone. You have no idea. And just being that friend for them, listening to them, understanding them, doing your own research. Doing your own research and reading things is 100% a great way to help people because then you're like, okay, this is what happens. Okay, I know the signs, and look at your friend's personal signs and what, triggers them. And then like it's like Glenn said, going on the internet, seeing other people, listening to advocates, listening to talks because there are talks, there are like special talks about these things from professionals. Don't listen to someone who says they're a professional but they don't have a professional background because sometimes they steer people in the wrong direction. But listening to those professional talks about this and just like I said, just being there for somebody because that is very important because we need that.
Yeah.
You know. Oh yeah, headphones are really helpful.
Yes. Bias earplugs.
Yes, yes, I have a friend who uses earplugs. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. I do want to acknowledge it's 8 o'clock. We said we were going to go 7 to 8. I do want to have time for us to drop Tiffany and Glen's
Mhm.
social, some of these folks on Twitter we want to follow, and we do have another comment adding on to Abby's question. So it is 8 o'clock. Thank you for sticking with us, and we will be wrapping this up with some of those resources for you moving forward.
Talk forever.
I know.
Yeah, we could. That's the strange thing. We can like talk all night about these things.
Yeah. There's not enough conversations that this one is like.
Did you want me to acknowledge the one comment here real quick?
Yeah, do you want to read from
Yeah.
August?
So August Atzwin, I'm sorry, August. I cannot remember how to pronounce your name. I know this guy in real life, and I don't remember how to pronounce your real last name. August Atzenweiler said, "For me, as someone with ADHD, I love absorbing information. A lot of the time, recalling that same information can be difficult."
Mhm.
So, Abby, like to think about that is sometimes we go on these long tangents, have this long idea where I'm like, I will just start talking in a loop, and then I'll be like, "What in the hell am I talking about?" And I'll just have this moment of realization that I don't remember what I'm talking about. You help me get back on track with what I was talking about? That
Mhm.
could be something you can help us with.
Yeah, and this might not be specific to neurodivergent people, but disability, if we want to include that as well. Subtitles and captions are great. Having
Yep.
audio instead of writing as well. I mean, I don't know, Tiffany, is that helpful to have more auditory things instead of always writing?
Yeah, it's closed captioning is great. Audio, yeah, like as a streamer, I have closed captioning, I have audio. I always make sure my subtitles on video games are nice and big so people can see it. I also have trigger warnings in video games for
Mm,
my own personal research because if I notice flashing lights, I'll put epilepsy warning, or if there's a subject that might be too intense for people, I'll just switch over to a puppy or a kitten.
mm,
And be like, yeah, we can't watch this right now. This is some deep stuff. So, it's yeah, being help. What's the word I want to use? It's on the tip of my tongue. I mean, being accommodating
mm.
to others is amazing. You
Yeah.
have no idea, and like it'll make things go 100%. Sorry, I'm on coffee right now. So, woo,
I got you.
and so like yeah, being the combinations of helping those with different disabilities is 100% something that everyone should be including, and that's not just with gaming. Twitter, there is a way to add closed caption to pictures, so that when you're posting a picture, you can
Alternate text.
yeah, yeah, you can put in the text and say describing what the picture is for people because not everyone can see a picture, even though they can read and stuff like that. So like, yeah,
Mhm.
it's the little things that you can do to help people. And it may not seem like much to you, but you have no idea how much it helps someone in the future. And this is something I'm learning. I didn't know about the picture thing. I really didn't. And until someone told me, "Hey, can you add descriptions to your picture? It will help me a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll do that." And sometimes I forget, and sometimes I remember.
Mm.
It's just how my brain works.
We're all
But
learning
yeah,
together. Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
I also would add, and you can tell me if you agree, but I think allowing in the work setting, and at school, allowing for people to take breaks, to
Yes.
walk around during class, to be able to walk around, to maintain focus, kind of like you were mentioning before, when maybe you can't respond to a certain question at this time, but ask me again later and I'll respond later.
Yes.
So giving space for folks to not have to go all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's a way that neurotypical people also can benefit from like a bit of a more, I want to say, relaxed culture, so that we
Mhm.
all don't burn out and can,
Yes.
yeah.
Uh,
Especially in this pandemic.
I yes, I fully agree. I hear that here in the United States actually that we're more go 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 than you would even find Europeans, almost any other nation. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's the same for Canada. I don't know. I can't speak for that because I don't know too much about it. But
Where
um,
a lot of the kids are in virtual right now, so a lot of kids do have that freedom to like get up and stretch and things like that. So I think it is still different than the United States, just a little bit.
yeah. I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry. Are you in the United States or are you in
I'm currently living in Canada.
you
So,
currently live in Canada, right?
but I am American.
Okay. But I agree. I think that neurodivergent and neurotypical people could both benefit from that. Neurodivergent people could benefit for more of it, maybe. I
Mhm.
think that we all are human and it would be it's not good cognitively to just sit there and work.
Oh
Um
no.
or flexibility for disabled or neurodivergent folks is also important.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you all. Tiffany, do you want to list your socials real quick? And then Glenn, list your socials where we can follow your work.
Yeah, my name is Tiffany Witcher. I'm on Twitch at twitch.tv/Tiffany Witcher, where I do accessibility talks and do a lot of charity streaming for different organizations, especially those of mental and physical diseases. And you can catch me at twitch.tv/Tiffany Witcher, on Twitter at Twitter_Tiffany Witcher, and I have a TikTok. So I upload my funny clips at TikTok. Uh, uh, Tiffany with your VT. So yeah, that's how you can find me.
Thanks. Glenn?
I'm also on Twitch at twitch.tv/Glen_Homer. And you can show up there. And I sometimes raise money for mental health charities and also other charities with my stream team. But it's also not just us talking about mental health, there's also a chaotic space for neurodivergent folks for us to celebrate things. I'm a chaotic person. So if you like that, you come hang out with me on my stream. I do occasionally post on YouTube at YouTube My name is Glen Homer, I think on YouTube as well, because they don't let you make a custom HTML on YouTube.
Yeah.
But my Twitter, you can follow me at Divergence Gamer, or on TikTok as Divergence Gamer.
Thank you. And all of the socials are listed on the community page currently at intersectedproject.org, also in this event page on Facebook, if that's how you're accessing it. So you can go back and click the links more directly. Thank you for joining Intersected Project, and don't forget to follow us and subscribe as well. Facebook is Intersected Project. Again, intersectedproject.org is our website with all of our work, and we are on Twitter and Instagram at intersected_org.
And I think I'll post these people on there, since the people you should follow.
Yeah, we can share that.
Yeah, we'll share that on.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, and hope to see you at our next event, whenever we hold that. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you. Bye.